Good morning, everyone, especially to our instructor, Mrs. Jolly Dalman. Today, we're going to discuss the French philosopher Rene Descartes. Rene Descartes was born on March 31, 1596, Descartes in France, and died on February 11, 1650, Stockholm, Sweden. Philosophical era as 17th century philosophy. Rene Descartes in 1596 and 1650 was a French philosopher and mathematician, credited as a foundational thinking in the development of Western nations of reason and science. His philosophy was built on the idea of radical doubt, in which nothing that is perceived or sensed is necessarily true. The only thing that remains true that there is mind or consciousness doing the doubting and believing at perceptions. Hence the famous formulation, I think, therefore I am. Or in Latin, the cogito ergo sum, or sum. Descartes also proposed that the mind and body were to separate and distinct entities. But even the body was not so certain a thing as the mind, because, like everything else in the world, the body could only be sensed because there was a mind to sense it. In 1663, Descartes' writings were placed on a list of prohibited books by the Pope because of the central place Descartes gave to reason and mind, rather than God. In his philosophy, here is explanation of the centrality of the reasoning mind and knowledge making. Who was Rene Descartes? Rene Descartes was extensively educated. First, at the Jesus College at the age of 8, then earning a law degree at 22. But an influential teacher set him on the course to apply mathematics and logic to understanding the natural world. This approach incorporated the contemplation of the nature of existence and of knowledge itself. Hence his most famous observation, I think, therefore I am. Early life of Rene Descartes. Rene Descartes was born on March 31, 1596, in La Haye en Touraine, a small town in central France, which has since been renamed after him to honor its most famous son. He was the youngest of three children, and his mother, Jane Blanchard, died within his first year of life. His father, Joachim, a council member in the provincial parliament, sent the children to live with their maternal grandmother, where they remained even after he remained a few years later. But he was very concerned with good education and sent Rene, at age of 8, to boarding school at the Jesuit College of Henry IV in Las France, several miles to the north, of 7 years. Descartes was a good student, although it is thought that he might have been sickly, since he didn't have to abide by the school religious schedule and was instead allowed to rest in bed until mid-morning. The subjects he studied, such as rhetoric and logic, and the mathematical art, which included music and astronomy, as well as metaphysics, natural philosophy, and ethics. So, did spending the next 4 years earning the Baroque baccalaureate in law at the University of Poitiers. Some scholars speculate that he may have had a nervous breakdown during this time. Rene Descartes later added theology and medicine to his studies, but he excelled all this, resolving to seek no knowledge other than that of which could be found in myself or else in the great books of the world. He wrote much later in this discourse on the method of rightly conducting the reason and seeking truth in the sciences, published in 1637. So he traveled, joined the army of brief time. So some battles and was introduced the Dutch scientist and philosopher Isaac Beckman, who would become, for Descartes, a very influential teacher. A year after graduating from Poitiers, Descartes credited a series of three very powerful dreams or visions with determining the course of his study for the rest of his life. Becoming the father of modern philosophy. Descartes is considered by many to be the father of modern philosophy because his ideas departed widely from the current understanding in the early 17th century, which was more feeling-based. While elements of his philosophy weren't completely new, his approach to them was. Descartes believed in basically cleaning everything off the table, all preconceived and inherited nations, and starting fresh, putting back one by one the things that were certain, which for him began with the statement, I accept. From this sprang this most famous quote, I think, therefore I am. Since Descartes believed that all truths were unlimitedly linked, he sought to uncover the meaning of the natural world with a rational approach through science and mathematics. In some way, an extension of the approach Sir Francis Bacon had asserted in England a few decades prior. In addition to discourse on the method, Descartes also published meditations on first philosophy and principles of philosophy, among other treatises. Although philosophy is largely where the 20th century deposit Descartes. He introduced certain geometry, which incorporates algebra, through his law of refraction. He developed an empirical understanding of rainbows, and he proposed a naturalistic account of the formation of the solar system, although he felt he had to suppress much of the due Galileo's faith at the hand of the Inquisition. His concern wasn't misplaced. Pope Alexander VII letter added Descartes to works to the index of prohibited books. Later life, date and legacy. Descartes never married, but he did have a daughter, Francine, born in Netherlands in 1635. He had moved to the country in 1628 because life in France was too bustling for him to concentrate on his work, and Francine's mother was a maid in the home where he was staying. He had planned to have the latter girl educated in France, having arranged for her to live with relatives, but she died of a fever at age 5. Descartes lived in Netherlands for more than 20 years, but died in Stockholm, Sweden on February 11, 1650. He had moved there less than a year before. At the request of Queen Christina, to be her philosophy tutor, the frugal health indicated of his early life persisted. He habitually spent mornings in bed, where he continued to honor his dream life, incorporating it into his waking methodologies in conscious meditation. But the Queen incidence of 5 a.m. lesson led to a bout of phenomena from which he could not recover. He was 53. Sweden was a Protestant country, so Descartes, a Catholic, was buried in the graveyard primarily for unbaptized babies. Later, he remained were taken to the abbey of Saint Germain des Prés, the oldest church in Paris. Descartes' approach of combining mathematics and logic with philosophy to explain the physical world turned metaphysical when confronted with questions of theology. It led him to contemplation of the nature of existence and the mind-body duality, identifying the point of construct to the body with the soul at the pineal gland. It also led him to define the idea of dualism, matter meeting non-matter, because his previous philosophical system had given man the tools to define knowledge of what is true. This concept led to the controversy. Fortunately, Descartes himself has also invited the methodological skepticism or certicism doubt, thus making philosopher of us all. Why was Rene Descartes important? Apart from his work in philosophy, Descartes was a leading mathematician and scientist. He invited the certain sense coordinate system, developed analytic geometry, and laid the foundation for the development of calculus. He also did groundbreaking work in physics, most prominently in the field of optics. What were Descartes' main ideas? Scholars agree that Descartes recognized at the least three innate ideas: the idea of God, the idea of finite mind, and the idea of infinite body.